underwater,
right,
where they owe more than their homes are worth. And the guy that was on the show was saying that, it's not a problem. He said people don't care what their houses are worth. People didn't buy houses as investments. They just bought them as a place to live. I mean, this guy is clueless. I would guess that the number one reason that people bought homes in the last 5 years was to make money.
Absolutely.
Because some realtor told them that you're going to make money buying a house, and if you're renting, you're throwing your money away. And people were convinced that they were going to build equity, and that's why they bought their houses, and that's why they were willing to stretch and make huge percentage of their income towards a home payment, was because there was a payday in the appreciation. And the reason they were willing to go so deeply into debt and to lie about their income and do all this stuff to get a house was not just so they can paint the walls with the colors that they wanted, was because they wanted to get rich like everybody else.
Well,
and also that same Zillow.com had a survey last week that showed that 60% of homeowners believe their houses have not lost any value in the last year.
Yeah, we saw that.
I mean, that's amazing. And that just shows you how clueless people are. And imagine how many more foreclosures there's going to be when the people living in these houses and struggling to make these mortgage payments actually realize how little their houses are worth.
Yeah. I read what you said about the come December, we won't be looking at Jingle Bells, we'll be looking at Jingle Mail when people's arms begin to reset again, and they're going to just walking away.
Well, the next big wave of resets are these option arms. I mean, these things are really toxic. And, the reason that the subprime mortgages, that problem happened first, was because the subprime guys, they only had 2 to 3 year teaser rates. That was the most they could do. But the guys that had better credit, that they were able to get 5-year and 7-year arms. And a lot of the option arms are 5 and 7 year. And these guys were making minimal payments. They were actually negative amortizing these mortgages the whole time. So you're going to have somebody who bought a house 5 years ago, and maybe they borrowed $500,000, and now all of a sudden they owe $550,000 because of 5 years of making the minimum payment. They actually added $50,000 to the principal of their loan. And now the mortgage is going to reset with a fully amortized loan on $550,000, and people are going to see their mortgage payments double and triple.
So you had mortgage payments going in the opposite direction of the housing
values,
value.
Right.
Well, yeah, plus their mortgage balance is going up as the value of their house is going down. Now, what's the odds that a guy is going to make the mortgage payment on a $550,000 mortgage on a $300,000 house? And especially now, since the government, Bush signed into law that bill that says, and I think it sunsets in another year or two, so you've got a short window. You've got a 1 or 2 year window to walk away from your mortgage and face no tax consequences.
Yeah, right, right.
Before Bush signed that bill, if you walked away from your mortgage or if you agreed to a write-down, whatever amount was written off or written down was taxable income in the year they did it.
Right.
Which would bankrupt most people, which was a real powerful incentive for people to make their home payments, because if they walked away from their home, the IRS was going to nail them.
Yeah.
But now they said, hey, you've got a window of opportunity. You can walk away from these liabilities scot-free.
Jeez.
And so a lot of people are going to do it. In fact, a lot of the people who are going to get this first bailout bill, the subprime bailout bill, where they're going to have their mortgages wiped out, a lot of these mortgages, these weren't the mortgages that people used to buy the home. A lot of the money that they owe is because they borrowed money for other things, like cars and vacations and all sorts of things that basically all these homeowners are going to be getting for free.
Down here in South Florida, we had people who actually retired on refinances. They bought homes for $60,000, $80,000, $90,000. The values went up to $350,000. They pulled out $200,000 in cash, and they had never had any belief that they were going to make the payments. They had more money in one lump sum.
I know, but now what's going to happen to those people is they're going to have that debt forgiven, and they're going to get to keep the cash.
Yeah. They made out. Now, with all this obvious economic data in front of everybody, and it is obvious, what can the National Association of Realtors and their rank and file member agents do to even survive the housing recession? And if it goes as long as you think it's going to go, is it just the inevitable demise of the real estate industry? Well,
look, as I said, I'm in the brokerage industry, and the brokerage industry went through something similar during the dot-com mania, where a lot of people became stockbrokers in 1999 and 98, 99, 2000. People left other professions to become stockbrokers because it was so lucrative. There were so many people buying stocks, and it was a can't-lose deal, and everybody was all the dot-com millionaires and billionaires. And so when the bubble burst, there was a big shakeout in the industry. A lot of brokers, found work as mortgage brokers, as a matter of fact, and went into the real estate market. But, the industry is obviously going to pare down. A lot of the people that join the industry later in the game are going to look for something else. I mean, it's going to separate the people that really deserve or should be in the profession from those who just kind of, entered it to make a quick buck. But look, I mean, obviously at some point in time there's going to be a real estate industry in some shape or form, and it's going to be a lot smaller than it is right now, and people are going to make a lot less money in the industry. But that's the way it's going to be. I mean, I was given this speech. It's interesting. In fact, if you want to see one, I don't know if you guys have watched it. It's up on YouTube. But if you put my name, Peter Schiff, and then put in mortgage bankers, so Peter Schiff mortgage bankers, you'll see a video that I gave at the seminar. I spoke at their national convention in Vegas a couple of years ago, and the whole presentation is on YouTube. And I was talking to a room full of 1,000 or 2,000 mortgage brokers, basically
and you made it
telling
out?
them that they were going to all be out of work. And and so it's an interesting. If you look at it, you know who I'm talking to. And I basically laid out everything that's happened in the last year. I told them, in advance that it was coming.
Wow.
But
well, Peter, you talk about the banks, and you were just talking about the mortgage bankers. The banks right now are tightening up their lending standards. Everybody, or a lot of people, talk about until they loosen up just a little bit, not to where we were before, that we're never going to get back. Do you see
first
banks?
of all, they're not even tight enough. They're still too loose. They got to get a lot tighter. I mean, think about it. I mean, first of all, they don't have any capital. The banks don't have any money, right? The only reason that there was so much mortgage credit available was because of the securitization industry, where we were able to securitize these mortgages and sell them to the Chinese and the Saudis. But that market is kind of shut down right now. So the only money the banks can loan is money they actually have on deposit. Right. They can't go to Norway. We bankrupted a little town in Norway with these subprime mortgages. So they have to look to their deposit base, which of course is very small. They don't have a lot of capital. Americans don't have any savings, so they don't have a lot of money to loan out. So they have to be very careful with that money. They have to make sure they get it back. And, you would think that people buying homes should have to have a 20% down payment. But, Fannie Mae, they're still guaranteeing mortgages with 3.5% down payments, which is like no down payment at all. So I think the lenders are going to be tighter and tighter and tighter, especially considering the realities of foreclosure now. As I mentioned earlier, if you foreclose on a house, you're only going to get back 40 or 50 cents on the dollar. So if someone comes to you and says, I want to borrow money to buy a house, I mean, you'd be like, are you crazy? Why would I want to lend you money to buy a house? Because if the person doesn't make the payments, you're stuck with a house that's worth half of what you loaned. So, because the people that are buying houses right now are still overpaying because there's so many houses on the market. People actually think that they're worth these crazy prices. So you have all these people trying to sell a house, and one idiot will actually buy one of these houses, and he'll negotiate a 10% discount from the offer, and he'll think he got a good deal. Well, of course, he still paid twice what the house is worth. But the thing is, if you actually have to sell a house right away, in foreclosure, you get half of what everybody's trying to get.
Is that where we should be pricing these properties?
Probably. Look, I was forecasting that home prices would fall 30% nationwide a couple of years ago, and people thought it was crazy. We're about halfway there with official prices down about 15%. But when I said 30% nationwide, that was because other markets, like California, Florida, Nevada, Arizona, these bubble markets were going to decline by 50%, and it was going to weigh down the national average. So in any of the markets that you had really spectacular appreciation, any of the markets where the majority of the mortgages or a significant percentage of mortgages were ARMs, those prices are going to drop by at least 50% in those markets, if not more. And if people are patient, if they really want to buy a house, cheap, wait for 60, 70, 80% off, you'll get those in foreclosures, or better yet, rather than taking a chance on a foreclosure, which really could be just, wrecked by the former occupant or the neighborhood, I would rather buy the properties from the banks where they went to foreclosure and they still couldn't sell them. And now they had to list them. And now you can go and look at it and buy a bank-owned property, because over the next few years, the banks are going to own a lot of property, and the lenders are going to own a lot of property, and the government's going to own a lot of property, and you'll have your pick.
Now, I'm going to ask you a question, Peter, directly from Mr. Schiff. The NAR and Lawrence Yun and all their economists over there, they do their marketing campaigns. It's a wonderful time to buy a house. Under what circumstances precisely would Peter Schiff buy another home right now?
Well, I don't own any home. I rent the home. I rent my primary residence. I don't own any real estate in the United States. And these economists are shills. It's propaganda. They're going to tell you it's a great time to buy a house, no matter what. All right, so